What is talk radio? Talk radio is you. Think about it. My job is to encourage you to think, then persuade you to speak to me. Then take what you say, analyze it, figure out what you desire, then talk about it on radio, so that you are keen to listen. And I further encourage you to think, then persuade you to speak about it. Then, I take what you say, analyze it, figure out what you desire, and the cycle goes from strength to strength. As long as you are there, we've got talk radio. Capitalk 100.4 FM. You set the agenda, we lead the conversation.
Beautiful evening it is tonight. This is the 15th of December 2017. Thank you very much for choosing Capitalk 100.4 FM, leading the conversation. Tonight in studio, I've got a panel and we're here to discuss a very interesting subject. And you'll understand why it's interesting because of the panel that I have. Last week, on the 7th of December 2017, the Finance and Economic Planning Minister, Honorable Patrick Chinamasa, presented the 2018 National Budget. Many different sectors have had their chance to chime in on the budget, make their commentary, and speak about the issues that they feel were adequately covered. Some were not adequately covered, but different sectors have had their say. Today, I've got in studio members of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, and we're going to be discussing the issues, the faith issues around the budget, or how the budget affects faith-based institutions. In studio today, I've got Reverend Samuel Sfelani. Rev, welcome to Capitalk.
Thank you, Napster.
It's great to have you. I've also got Mrs. Sebia Kwaramba. Ma'am, welcome.
Good evening, listeners.
Great to have you. Great to have you. Thank you for coming. Dr. Prosper Chitambara, also in studio.
Thank you.
All right. And I also have Mr. Collins Shava. Welcome to Capitalk.
Thank you.
All right. So, lady and gentlemen, welcome to the station. The first thing I'd like to ask is, what is ZCC? What is the Zimbabwe Council of Churches?
The Zimbabwe Council of Churches is a mother body of 26 Christian denominations.
Mm-hmm.
It was founded in 1964, originally as the Rhodesia Missionary Conference, and then later to Rhodesia Christian Council. And that's how old it is. And it constitutes of mainly what the so-called mainline churches. And as of 30th of October this year, we now have an associate member in the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops Commission. They've come in as an associate member.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, and these are churches that are bound by a shared theological understanding, that God, who created and sustains all creation, continues to save and redeem it through Jesus Christ, and also empowers his people, the church, just to reflect and act together for the realization of justice, of peace, and of abundance amongst the people of Zimbabwe. So in a nutshell, that is the Zimbabwe Council of Churches.
So what would you say, what do you represent as an organization?
As an organization, what we mainly represent, faith communities.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I think over and above that, we represent the common man on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at Zimbabwe, according to ZimStats, more than 80% of the people in Zimbabwe are Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, this is a very big constituency in whatever matter, that affects our communities and the nation at large. So in a way, the Zimbabwe Council of Churches represents the people of
Mm-hmm.
the country.
All right. I did mention at the beginning of this program that we're talking about the national budget. Where does the church come in, or where does ZCC come in terms of talking about the budget process?
Well, I think the justification, people would be asking, what has the church got to do with the budget?
True.
And many a times we're told, no, you need to keep to preaching. But I think we have three premises upon which our involvement in the whole process lie. I think the first one that I just mentioned about Zimbabwe being predominantly a Christian nation. If 80% of people on a particular Sunday or Saturday or whatever day sit in a congregation of faith, and therefore that is a massive constituency. So I think that's the first premise upon which our involvement is based. And secondly, the theological values and principles, the simple principles of stewardship. Zimbabwe is a country that is endowed with massive resources. So as as Christians, our principle of stewardship, the common good. So it would be our business to see that whatever resources are channeled into the fiscus are then, equitably distributed amongst the people. So that's an interest, that's an issue of economic justice. So that is part of our mandate as a church. And then lastly, I think the constitutional basis that, the Constitution is very clear. Section 13 of the Constitution, compels the state to involve the people in formulation and implementation of development plans and programs. So constitutionally, we also have a mandate to go in there.
Constitutionally, very interesting. I guess constitutionally, every citizen has a mandate.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, as the church, would as an institution, as the church, would that not then look like interference?
Not at all. I think I'll ask colleagues to come in just to share the structure of the Council of Churches, as it were, because what we're representing are different issues that affect the people. So instead of it being viewed as interference, it's actually a God-given mandate of being stewards, of being the watchdogs. From time immemorial, prophets also always stood in the gap, to keep the ruling elite in check. So it is our mandate as a church to speak for and on behalf of the people.
Okay, Collins, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, maybe I can just jump in and just add on to what the Reverend has been saying. Kuti izoni church inofamba navanhu, inofamba nema-struggles avanhu. Socially and economically, we work with the people, we walk with the people, because the church lives with the people. I think even in any sort of a place, the first institution that you meet along the road going anywhere is a church. And that means the church has the mandate and has the capacity to reach out to so many people, and it knows how the people are living in different communities. Okay. That means the church is the best position to also assist in addressing the issues that are affecting the people, working with the people towards economic and social justice that may be a problem in our community. As we can see in our country, many people are suffering from different problems, economically related problems, and even the young people are mostly affected because of these economic situations. And these people are in the church. And they come to church every Sunday. On a Sunday, they come to church with their problems, with their burdens. That's how the church hears that mandate to work with the people, because they stay with the people. They know that.
So does this mean that as the church, or the representatives of the church, as the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, are you involved in all the other processes? Is it just the budget, or whenever the government comes in with any other policies and such announcements, does the ZCC get this involved?
Yes. As Zimbabwe Council of Churches, maybe I'll just take you a little bit back. We have some programs that we are running as Zimbabwe Council of Churches. We have been mandated by the church to run these programs. One of the programs, we have 3 programs actually. We have the active citizenship and good governance, which deals with trying to bring a lot of people to speak to issues of governance, to be active citizens, to participate in every national process that will be happening in the country. So that is mandated by the Constitution. So it is a program that we are running to make sure that all the people in Zimbabwe, we can start speaking to issues that are affecting the people. The other program that we have is social Christian unity and social cohesion, where we are saying Christians, as many as we are in the country, we can see that we are deeply fragmented into different segments. True. We call for Christian unity and social cohesion. If we kana wangwana wakangawani mfungo mwechete, then the solutions can be found. That is our vision, that people will see a collective goal to solve the kind of problems that we are having, and we are trying to build that Christian unity and social cohesion. We have the other third program, which is economic justice and youth empowerment, where we are speaking to issues of economic justice directly linked to the budget process and other processes that happen in terms of domestic resource mobilization and how resources are being used, transparency and accountability. It's some of the aspects that we are dealing with within that issue. And we are specifically focusing with young people because young people are the deeply affected in this country. You can see that young people, most of them, they graduate from schools, but there are no jobs. There's no source of living. So we need to work with the young people to try and find some ways to influence processes that happen in the nation, between be it voter registration, be it elections, be it programs that are involved in where people have to put in some input into policies that the country is formulating. We are all there. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic! I like the one you mentioned about the unity of churches, and that's a big one. But we'll discuss that one on another day. If you're just tuning in to Capitalk, you're listening to a special program that is brought to you by the Zimbabwe Council of Churches. Today we're discussing the 2018 national budget that was announced on the 7th of December 2017. In studio, I have Reverend Samuel Svelani, Mrs. Sebia Kwaramba, Dr. Prosper Chitambara, and Collins Shava, and we're discussing the budget from the church's perspective. So let's come back to the budget now. We digressed a little bit. What were the major issues in this budget process?
Oh, thank you. Let me say a budget or a national budgeting process, the tool itself represents the priorities or the preferences of the government, and also it is the same tool that is used to facilitate economic development. At the same time, it also provides the opportunity to address the social and economic challenges that face the citizens. Mm-hmm. So that's where we come in as a church to see to what extent, because you would find that much of our attention should be on the social protection aspect, where we see to it that there should be increased support for the critical social services such as health and education. I understand you understand that the government made commitments to quite a number of declarations, such as the Abuja Declaration of 2001, which states that there should be at least 15% of the budget goes to health, and the Dakar Declaration, which stipulates that 20% of the resources to be allocated to education, and also the Maputo Declaration, which stipulates that at least 10% should go to agriculture. So as church, we do advocate for increased support on those social services aspects, because over the years we have realized that there's been a gradual decline in the capacity or depreciation in the capacity of the citizens to take care of themselves, particularly those pensioners and the disabled people and the marginalized people. There's been that depreciation in the capacity to sustain their own lives. So that's where we come in as a church to see that there is proper allocation in those critical services. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Were these things catered for? Did the budget address these issues, or maybe they didn't? What's the position?
Well, I think to some extent, but as the church, we are strategically advocating for proper, inclusive and sustainable development in terms of all our key macroeconomic policies. So these are policy thrusts that put people at the center of development in terms of prioritization of resources, for example. Okay. So I think to some extent we saw a marginal increase, for example, in allocation to healthcare. But again, it's very marginal. It's not adequate, because when you look at the vote that was given to health, for example, it was 7.7%. 7%? 7.7% of the total budget.
Instead of the 20% that is...
Which is below the 15% Abuja Declaration benchmark that Zimbabwe has actually committed itself to.
Hey, so to the half.
Yeah, exactly. And when you compare in terms of, so when you actually calculate the per capita allocation, the per person allocation, we're actually at $25. So government is planning to spend $25 per Zimbabwean on healthcare next year, which is grossly inadequate. Yeah. You compare with South Africa. South Africa, they are spending around $600 per person, per South African on healthcare. Wow. Zambia, they are at about $200 per person on healthcare. Botswana, they are at about $350 per person on healthcare. So I think our healthcare, a lot can still be done, I think. And also the other issue,
is it just the fact that we have a small budget? Or,
no, I think it's about wrong.
Or is the allocation?
I think it's about wrong priorities or the prioritization. When you look at countries that have developed or that are developed, they actually prioritize issues of human welfare, education, your health care. They put that at the core of their policies. In Europe, for example, they are spending on average about 7% of their GDP on health care. In Zimbabwe, we are spending about 1.5% of GDP on healthcare. So I think it's really about wrong priorities. So the focus of the budget has not really changed in terms of it being it's not pro-poor, it's pro-capital probably. And also it's it has remained highly consumption-oriented, which means we are not putting enough resources to social services and also to issues of infrastructure. Of course, albeit there's been an improvement in capital expenditure, but I think it's also not adequate to deal with the infrastructure bottlenecks and deficits that we're actually experiencing in the country.
Any other issues you feel should have been addressed?
I think the issues to do the reform of the state-owned enterprises. I think the minister didn't give enough details in terms of how that's going to be done, because I think it's an area that the minister has always been talking about, or government rather has always been talking about. But in terms of actual progress on the ground, I think we had challenges in terms of implementation. So I think probably would expect probably more clarity on how government plans to reform state-owned enterprises and parastatals in a socially sensitive and inclusive manner. So I think going forward, what the church is also advocating for are inclusive policies that take into account the voices of every Zimbabwean. I think every Zimbabwean must be brought on board in terms of policy implementation going forward. So the issues of social dialogue, I think, will also become very critical, so that every stakeholder is brought on board
and is represented.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, we've already heard that they're pouring money into the national airline, so that's that one answered. But how do you feel things could have been done differently? Which areas do you feel they could have given more attention to, or practically this they could have done? Because listen, the minister has got so many other factors that are affecting the budgeting process. There's you cannot ignore the political factors in the mix. You cannot ignore the fact that this is a budget that is coming out of a transitional period that was unprecedented in the country. So the political factors are coming into play. What could they have done differently?
I think one area, when you look at our defense and security spending, I think it's inordinately high. So I believe, I think the minister should have probably reduced spending on military and security, and probably scaled up spending on healthcare and education. Education was allocated about 16.9%, which is about 17% of the total budget. Defense and security was allocated about 17% of the total of what. So they've probably thought that the minister was going to reduce defense spending and allocate more resources towards healthcare, towards education, towards also scaling up infrastructure investments. So that's one example.
Interesting. If you're just joining us, we're talking about we're doing an analysis and review of sorts of the 2018 national budget, but we're doing it from the church's perspective. Collins, you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I wanted to add something into the discussion. Dr. Prosper has clearly spelled out some of the things, but as a youth, I was just concerned with some of the aspects which were not mentioned, really skated on the budget, like on domestic resource mobilization, on mobilization of resources in the country. The government really did not put out the proposal straight. Kuti mari yese irimo munyika tichakwanisa kuitorawo sei, especially iri kuzvicherwa uku kwatinongonzwa kuti kunomainiwa kunochegwa zvakanyanya, kwakatomboshayikwa 15 billion rimwe gore. Saka hurumende haina kunyatsotaura kuti izvi zvichanyatsoitwa sei kuti vadhile nema continued illicit financial flows kunyanya dzekuzvicherwa uku, nenyaya yekuti vachaimprova sei management yema natural resources, kuti zviite guarantee effective domestic resource mobilization kuti mari ipinde mukati mepoto yatoda kuti ikwanise kuzosvikawo kuvanhu vakasiyana siyana mukati menyika. Ndo chimwe chinhu chandofunga kuti chagona kunge chakatisaririri.
Go ahead, my Kwaramba.
Thank you very much. The other issue again, what the church is advocating for, is for prioritization of the small and medium enterprise, trying to formalize it, because of deindustrialization, you realize that the economy of Zimbabwe currently is being driven by, 70% of the economy is being driven by the informal sector, which is purely vendors, and you'd find that most of the business is being conducted in the streets, which is tantamount to compromising the domestic resource mobilization, like what Colin has just mentioned. So priority should be given in that area to formalize so that they contribute to the fiscal, and also they have access to lines of credit. And also the other issue, to advocate for the increased transparency in the extractive industries, to ensure that the whatever the natural resources that come out of they are bought at the appropriate value and give incentives for beneficiation. The other issue also is to, because we've had quite a number of reports on, coming out of the Auditor General's reports, issues coming out, and we don't normally hear follow-ups to see what type of kind of action is taken against the perpetrators. That kind of thing, I think we need to deal with the issues of corruption to its highest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we're also expecting the minister to spell out innovative ways of mobilizing resources domestically, so as to finance critical sectors like healthcare. When you look at what other countries are doing, they are coming up with what are called corrective taxes. They're also coming up with sugar taxes, for example, to discourage the consumption of sugary products and also to mobilize additional resources. In South Africa this year, actually, they introduced the 20% sugar tax on sugary beverages. That was actually used to create a fund to fund NCD programming in South Africa.
What's NCD?
Non-communicable diseases in South Africa. So there's been an increase in the burden of NCDs in Zimbabwe. And the minister actually didn't articulate an appropriate response, especially in terms of financing our NCD response, so as to reduce the burden of NCDs in Zimbabwe.
I've got a question coming through here from a listener. This is Joram in Mount Pleasant. He says the clergymen in the studio seem to be in the complaining mode. What were you happy with in the budget? So is there anything that we were satisfied with or happy with?
I think we've already mentioned some of them when we said actually there's been, I think, an improvement in the capital budget, I think, which is actually positive. There's also been a marginal improvement in healthcare, which is also positive. But I'm also saying that I think there are a number of other issues that the minister probably didn't address that could have been addressed. So we are not just complaining, but we're also saying that the minister did well, but there are also other issues that he didn't address that could have been addressed.
Reverend Sedan?
Yep. Look, I think in a nutshell, when we look at the whole budget, it is a progressive budget. We can work with this budget. It's probably the best budget we've had in a long time. But what we're just trying now to do is then to do a review in areas where we feel things could have been done better. But look, I'll tell you one thing. In terms of reduction in government spending, we give them kudos. They did well. Although in the process of trying to reduce budgetary spending, we feel, for instance, the issue of commissions, which are very critical for social cohesion, which are very critical for matters of good governance. The minister didn't spell out exactly how they are going to be funded. In fact, he spoke to the fact that they're going to scale down the operations of the commissions. For instance, the Anti-Corruption Commission. That is a very important commission in this country if we're going to plug the illicit flows and to deal with corruption. But now the position of the minister is that only one person is going to be to remain as a full-time person there. We're looking at the National Healing and Commission. You are aware that Zimbabwe has been suffering from a legacy of violence throughout elections, even in between elections, and therefore national healing is a very, very serious issue. And for us then to say we scale out on funding on commissions, then we feel there you could have done much better to put resources in some of these commissions. If we are serious about fighting corruption, then we need to put money in the Zimbabwean Corruption Commission, and also we're looking at the matters of women's empowerment. We have the Gender Commission.
Yeah.
This is an area that needs to be streamlined even within the budget, but we don't really seem to get such of this. But the bottom line is we're happy with what has been allocated to agriculture. The Maputo Declaration states that we need to commit 10% of the budget, and we are on 9.9%, and we're happy with that. But we're then calling, we're not going to rest on our laurels. We're saying we're then calling now to the government to then, whatever distributions need to be done in agriculture. We're going to be revamping our irrigation systems. We're going to have a command farming, command animal husbandry. There's a resuscitation of cold storage and so forth. We need those resources now to be distributed in a non-partisan and an equitable way. So in as much as they've put in good money there, we still need to stand as a church, as a watchdog, to make sure that every Zimbabwean gets to benefit from this national cake.
It's 7:03, and I'll need to hear the way forward in a little bit. What do you think is the way forward as we go? But I've got another contribution coming through from Maposa in Westley. Maposa says, please comment, what is your take on taxation of the church? Because that would contribute to the fiscus. Anyone want to take that on?
I think the issue of taxation of the church, I think our view as the church is that you can't tax the tithes and offerings that are given or that are paid in church, because that would amount obviously to double taxation. But where probably the church is engaging in commercial activities, that is liable to taxation. That can be actually taxed.
So where the church is selling or running businesses,
or running a business, actually,
a farm or whatever.
Yeah. So I think that's the common understanding within the church, that I think that can actually be taxed. Yeah.
And actually, look, the church employs a lot of people who are contributing through payee. And when we buy commodities, we contribute via value-added tax. So as we speak, the church is being taxed. But obviously, as Doc said, look, the issue of pledges and tithes, that amounts to a double taxation, because the people who are giving this money have already been taxed. Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
But whenever the church is engaged in commercial, I think that the trick now is where to draw the line, to say which is commercial and which is not. And I think as a church we need to be to stand guided by matters of justice and declare honestly as a church to say this is a commercial venture. So there's no problem there.
All right. Now back to the budget. What is the way forward? What would you recommend? What do you see going into 2018 with the national budget that was presented by Honorable Patrick Chinamasa?
I think basically the way forward is just to implement, I think, the key institutional reforms that were enunciated by the minister. I think if implemented, I think they will provide a solid platform for the country to be able to initiate and sustain a full economic recovery going forward. But of course, we're also concerned that next year being an election year, the uncertainties associated with an election could actually affect even the implementation of the budget. They could affect business confidence, they could affect investor confidence, which could result in the country failing to meet some of the key targets that were articulated by the Minister of Finance. So I think there's also need for the continuation and subsistence of peace in the country, so as to provide a solid framework for the implementation of the budget. So peace and unity, I think, are very important going forward, because a house that is divided against itself cannot stand, as the Bible says.
Absolutely. A house divided against itself cannot stand. So we're looking for unity.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, we've come to the end of our discussion tonight. Thank you very much for listening to Capitalk 100.4 FM. In studio, we had representatives from the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, Reverend Samuel Sifelani, Ms. Sebia Kwaramba, Dr. Prosper Chitambara, and Mr. Collins Shawa. Thank you very much for coming through tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stan.
All right. Until next time, hopefully, when we hit the budget review, you also come through and maybe the midterm budget review, we'll come and discuss. Maybe confidence is going to waver because of the elections. Maybe this is going to happen. And hopefully I can have the same panel and we can catch up.